Welcome to the Leadership with Biana Kovic Show, and thank you for being with us. Our topic, leadership, focuses on leaders such as yourselves. We believe that leadership is a skill that can be learned through practice and awareness. It is our hope that our conversation will help you become more reflective when it comes to your own leadership practices and enable you to leave a positive legacy. Our very special guest is Sonny Tannan. Sonny is a veteran, award-winning business developer and philanthropist who was offered the opportunity to become one of the LinkedIn's first video content creators. Sonny developed a LinkedIn article and video series called Through the Eyes of Om. Through the Eyes of Om are lessons taken from raising his son and are meant to encourage others to approach the world with a little more creativity and curiosity. As fans of three, Sonny and Om capture moments of insight from their day-to-day lives and give readers 3 takeaways to encourage others to focus, collaborate, and inspire. Their first book, Through the Eyes of Om, Exploring Malaysia, is set to release March of 2019. They use curiosity and insight to tell the story of Om's very first visit to his mother's home country. Their hope is to inspire children and their parents to live life with curiosity and enthusiasm for what's to come. Sonny, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Biana. I appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to our chat.
Sonny, you are quite diverse in what you do. You're the author who recently published the book Through the Eyes of Om, who is actually your son. And you're also founder and co-host of The Unlearned Show, and also co-founder of Real Life Brand. So I was wondering, you can talk to us a little bit. How did you come about starting all these different ventures and writing a book?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, if you and I had met a year ago, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. So the very first thing that I'd love to share is that anything is possible. Anybody, regardless of your background, your experience, where you come from, where you choose to go, anything is possible. And so the beauty of what we do in life, my hashtag with my son, Om, is we're fans of three. So the very first thing is, if you can have a focus on anything, and I'll share just a little bit of a story of my background on things, you can accomplish a great deal. Number 2 is you have to have collaboration. So you can't do any of these things on your own. There's always people that have been out there, they've done things, maybe they're exploring things and they want to do a joint venture with you. So really look to be inclusive of other people, and especially people that you either know or that you would love to know. And of course, the third thing for us is always about inspiration. We want to make sure that we leave this world a better place than how we found it. And myself, Om, is a 3-year-old. So I want to make sure that as a dad, as a parent, as a husband, as a spouse, I'm showing him and I'm leading through actions that this is how you should think about doing things. And of course, he's got to forge his own way. Mm-hmm. So Through the Eyes of Om has actually been really kind of neat for us. Om and myself create videos on LinkedIn. We were lucky enough for the last year or so to be invited to participate in a program where we create our videos on smartphone. And throughout our time of creating videos for the last year or so, we've had people from all around the world that have joined us in our journey. They've commented, they've been a part of it. They've given us positives. There's, of course, been negatives, but there's been engagement of people saying, this is what we love. This is what we like to see. This is what we feel when we see you and Om engaging on video. And so we created a book. So Om is 3, and so far he's been to about 8 countries. And we thought, how great would it be to create a journey in a children's book through the eyes of Om in all of the countries that we visit. So it's literally a children's book sharing about adventure, curiosity, looking at the world through the lens of a child and his dad, and talking about the perspectives of life as we explore other cultures and other places around the world. Mm-hmm. So that's really what Through the Eyes of Om is all about. And then you mentioned being able to be a co-founder and a co-host of The Unlearned Show. I count myself extremely lucky to be working with 5 other just extremely wonderful human beings from around the United States and around the world that we share our perspective on things with global interviewees. So, for instance, we interview people from all around the world, and we talk about how do you break bad habits with a purpose. So our goal is to explore how people have become successful in whatever it is that they do today. And it's really not about what is like the great story. It's more about how did they overcome? How did they get past adversity? What did they do to be successful in whatever it is that they do today? So it's really digging deep and talking and having these great conversations with people all around the world. So it's been an exciting time for us, and being an author and being a host, much like yourself, on a video cast and a pod. It's just, what can we do to share these wonderful stories with people all around the world?
And talking about your show, is there a recipe for people to become successful that they shared with you, some commonalities that they would say to, you have to do this or that to move to that next level?
That's a really great question. So yes, I do think there have been some commonalities, and I think that there have also been some aha or like some wow moments. So the premise of the Unlearn show is, what do people have to unlearn in order to become successful? And what we mean by that is, education is so important for many, and not just traditional education. So not going into a classroom and learning from a teacher, but real world applications or practical applications of experiencing the world. And so some of the things that have been very central and core in most of the people that we've talked with have been this. One, you have to know what it is you're passionate about. So your why. And I think that when people have been able to identify both their why and what it is that drives them to accomplish that why, that passion, I think once they've identified it and then they start to change the way that they shape their own day-to-day dealings or their future or the people that they surround themselves with, those are the types of people that tend to really achieve their goals. So it's identifying your own why and then making sure that you have the right supporting cast around you to achieve that why for yourself. I think the second thing that we've really noticed was that people that are willing to be disruptors. So, we've enjoyed a variety of industries and times. And of course, with the advent of technology and the different generations that are coming up, things have just gotten a little bit faster. So sometimes good, sometimes bad. I think the people that, when I say disruptors, it's people that are willing to challenge the status quo. Not necessarily just upset an apple cart, but to say, this is how people have been doing it. Does that necessarily make that the best way to do it? Sometimes it's yes, sometimes it's no, and it's just tweaking it to do things better. So the disruptors are the people that are always challenging what could or maybe should come next. And then, of course, as a fan of three, the third one is, there's something to be said about a social component of things. What I mean by that is this. It is very difficult to accomplish something today without having the right people surrounding you. So making sure that you are approaching people that have either gone there and they've done it, and you're trying to learn. So it's always about self-development and knowing that you can always learn from somebody. It could be somebody that has no experience, little experience. Maybe they have years of experience. Doesn't matter where they're from the world. It's just having an open mind to understand that you can learn from any person and anything and any experience. So having that open mind and being able to say, let's be inclusive to look at things that we might not have thought of before.
And it seems to me it's almost being a visionary and being very adaptable and open to change, right?
Absolutely. I think you hit it spot on, right? It's adaptability. And I also think it's having the courage to fail, right? So it's not so much about when you fail and then you're criticized in the traditional sense. It's more you fail and then you find out what maybe happened and then you work to do something about it. And adaptability and flexibility is absolutely critical. It's how fast can you pivot and continue to keep the core essence of what you want to do and still be successful by just changing a little bit here and there.
What's interesting to me today, rate of change is so fast. How does one keep up with it?
That's a great question. I think it's different for everybody. And I think the big thing, too, is that, the traditional model of, we'll just call it or term it corporate America versus maybe some of the tech companies or, the next generation that's coming up or will be coming up here. I think that you have to understand that you can't continue to operate in the traditional mindset. I think we're in a very unique time right now where there are multiple generations in the workplace at a variety of levels. So people that are what we would term boots on the grounds, to middle management, to executives, to leadership. So it's I think cross-training or cross-education across all of those generations, plus the fact that you have to be willing to, like you said, open your mind and be willing to accept change regardless of what level that you're at. So, for example, just because you've got 1 or 2 years of experience doesn't mean that the ideas that you pose at the table might be any less important or willing to act on from somebody that maybe has been in the industry for 20 years. And I think the companies that are really flourishing are taking that kind of mindset to say, well, let's be open about these ideas regardless of what somebody's experience or education might be.
You know, I used to work in an organization, I think I shared that before with my listeners, where the chain of commands was very strong. It meant even like you can't share unless it's your turn to share. So what advice do you have for folks who work in corporate America where that sort of there is such a strong structure to when you can you speak, what can you share, and other things?
Great question. So there's a lot to be said about the companies that have been there for 50 years or 100 years, or the companies that have existed for a long time, where they have a very set structure, if you will, thinking within the box to say, here's when something needs to be passed up the chain. It's in a very ordered and progressive manner. There's absolutely something to be said about that. And I'll talk a little bit about, my military leadership. There's every instance and every essence of when you're taught to do something in a certain manner, there's typically a rationale for that. And so, for example, in the military, you've got your officers, you've got your senior leadership, and then you've got your boots on the ground. And so in this instance, when somebody is told to do something, there's somebody's life that might be on the line. So having the ability to be given an order and react with that order with a term of muscle memory is important, because it could mean the life of the person standing to your right or the left of you. However, that being said, I can tell you the leaders that I wanted to be like are the ones that I looked up to the most, were the ones that were always training each of their leaders and each of the leaders that were below them to take the next role of responsibility. So in essence, you were trying to train the next leader, not the next follower. And why is that important? Because you as a leader shouldn't necessarily want to dictate or to remain in a position of power where you're not giving your team the appropriate ability to make decisions for themselves. So for me, it was always about how could I train the next person or people to take that next leadership role? So that way, if anything were to ever happen to me or something were to happen, and to give them and groom them the ability to think for themselves and take that next step, I wanted them to think like that, because ultimately, in my mind, that's what would make them better leaders. And I think that the leaders that I've always been most impressed about are the ones that give their people that trust. Mm-hmm. They're the ones that give them that autonomy, or they say, I value you. I value what you're thinking and what you're saying. And I think that you can really accomplish a lot more by doing that.
I really appreciate you sharing that, because it seems to me you come from more teaching and coaching perspective and mentoring perspective. But what about the leaders that are afraid to let go? I mean, we have leaders nowadays that just don't want to give people power because they're afraid that they would be threatened by it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that if we looked maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, that might have been okay. The traditional mindset was, you put your time in, you work hard, and you work your way up, the chain of leadership. And I think today, the generation that's coming up now, the ones that are going to be coming up now, and the ones that will be coming up in, 15 or 20 years ahead of us, they want the ability to make their own decisions. They want that creativity. And so I think that you're seeing a shift, and it's already happened, but I think you're seeing this shift of people want to have the ability to be heard. So whatever it is that they want to say, whatever input that they want to have, it's just there's so much more dialogue. And once again, it goes back to technology. Not the only thing, but you can see that there's so much more opinions, sharing of ideas, collaboration, where they just want to be heard. They want to be known that whatever input they're giving is either being heard or acted upon. And so I think that the leaders that continue to operate in the way where if I tell you to do something, you have to jump and do it, I don't think they're going to be quite as successful as the ones that are really working hard to give others a seat at the table and to be heard.
That's a very good point. I often talk about leadership and language. And from someone coming from military background, I was wondering if you can share some thoughts on that, the importance of leadership and language.
Absolutely. So I can share something from my own self. So I think one of the biggest challenges that I had was when I came out of the military, it's a very structured environment. You know, if you're in a leadership role, you say something and it's translated down the line. It's very much here's what's being said, disseminate that information. You know, you're not going to share every single piece of whatever the plan may be or the mission may be, and you share just enough to the appropriate personnel. And so I think that what I've realized is that I firmly believe that sometimes understanding the big picture, so the strategic imperative, if you will, is just as important as that here's the marching order, 1, 2, 3. So for me, I always believe that sharing the bigger picture helps and gives understanding to the others of, well, here's the goal. Here's what we're really trying to accomplish. Now, it depends on who you're talking to as well. So you have to be, as a leader, aware enough to know how much information should be shared and when it should be shared. And I think that can be applied outside of the military as well. The big difference for me, though, when I stepped from the military world to the civilian world was that communication, tonality, body language, word usage, just the softness of how you convey something is so critical. So, in the military, I could say something or somebody could say something to me as a leader and it would be received based on the rank or the respect of that person. Whereas in the civilian world, we have a lot more people that just have to question, well, why? Or can you explain that? Or give me a rationale or reason. And so things tend to be, I think, interpreted just a little bit differently, which is not bad, but I think there's just a lot more depth that has to go into every conversation, and it's good and bad. Sometimes people misinterpret things, and that's why it's so important to just be very clear and articulate in our conversations, because you have to remember people come from all walks of life. Mm-hmm. So you and I might say something to each other, and it might be completely interpreted in a different manner by somebody else that doesn't have the type of experience that you and I might have.
And how do you regain the trust back when it's broken by the language or, the treatment, the way you treat people? What would be the ways that, in your opinion, you can regain the trust back?
That's a great question. I think that it has to be a work in progress from both parties. Number one, you have to identify that something has been said that has maybe offended somebody or maybe has been interpreted in the wrong way. And so I think, the big challenge today is that people have to put their egos aside, right? They have to be willing to say, okay, I understand there's a different perspective that's not necessarily mine. It might not necessarily be the other person's. And if both people can recognize and respect the fact that there is a way that it might have been interpreted in a different way, you have to make sure, or you have to be able to be willing to say, yes, that might have happened. I think the second thing is you have to be willing to actually say, I can see how that might have been taken in a different manner. Not right, not wrong, just it might have been seen in a different manner. And then you have to work together, right? You have to be able to say, well, let's come to a consensus to what is ultimately our goal? What are we trying to accomplish here? And how can we get to that goal together? I think that's the biggest challenge. And for me, I liken it to the story of being a dad. So my son, actually this just happened today. So he has a remote controlled truck where he said, Dad, there's no batteries in this truck. And for me, as a parent, as an adult, somebody who's got a lot of other, I'm putting quotation marks here, important things in my life, right, says, great, well, there's no batteries, so it's not going to work. Now, to my son, this monster truck with the batteries is the most important thing in that moment. And so it's for him the most important thing to make sure this starts to work. And so his counter was, but without the batteries, it doesn't work. And I had to pause for a second to think, okay, it's not important to me, but it is important to him. And I had to stop what I was doing to say, well, let's find a solution that will work for both of us, where we don't have batteries in our house right now to make this truck work. So how can we make this truck work? What is important to about this truck? It wasn't that the batteries weren't there. It's just the truck wasn't moving without batteries. And he actually came to the solution himself. He found a way to tie a string to the truck and actually pull it along. And he's like, Daddy, I don't need batteries. The truck is working now. And we both worked on it together. And I said, absolutely brilliant. We found a solution that works for him and for me, but I never asked him the question. He's 3, mind you. Why did he need the batteries? It's because he wanted the truck to move on its own. Mm-hmm. So it's uncovering that root problem and having the patience and the diligence to say, well, what is it that's really bothering this person? And then finding a solution for that person.
But it also kind of shifting your priorities, because you kind of stopped and said, let me figure out what's bothering him, right?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So now I want to go back to, you mentioned your son, and he is actually an influencer. And he is a leader in his own right. And I'd like for you to share it with us, especially for the folks who do not know, how does one become an influencer on LinkedIn, and especially when someone is 3 years old?
Yeah, so about a year and a few months now. I personally had about 500 people in my network. And when I started creating videos on LinkedIn Video, it's been about a year and a half now. My very first video was with Ohm. And since then, the majority of my videos and the channel that I've created has been with Ohm. And I've noticed this very subtle but interesting thing. When I post a video without Ohm or with other guests, when I try to interview them and create something that in my mind brings value, it's actually not very well received. So people have actually tied Ohm, as you mentioned, as an influencer, whatever definition people want to give that, they've tied my channel and Ohm as one person or one brand. And I absolutely love it, because what we recognize is people love to see our interaction as a son and a father and the stories that we share together. And from day one, as fans of 3, we've done the exact same thing. And number one is just be authentic. So it's authenticity. And what that means is, don't try to put something out there that isn't who you are or the message that you're trying to share. Especially today, people can see right through it with the snap of your fingers. The second thing is consistency. And what I mean by that is, when we first started posting, we were posting every single day. And I have no idea how we were able to do that. Mind you, I had a 2-year-old that I was recording videos with. I don't know most adults that can post daily videos. So consistency just means find something that, once again, is comfortable for you and comfortable for the audience that you're trying to reach. And the third thing for us, what inspiration for us is, I say like a value or an education. So make sure before you start to create these types of videos, so in the case of and being an influencer, is what's the value that you're trying to convey to your audience? And don't be afraid to shift it and change it. There's a lot of awesome and wonderful and great creators out there, where some people create for 10 minutes at a time. Some create for 60 seconds at a time. So don't be afraid to actually try something. Just put a little bit of thought to what it is that you want to do and test it out and go out there and see what works.
Mm-hmm. And what I appreciate, you said, change it up a bit if it's not working.
Absolutely, yeah.
And when was that point when you actually realized that Om was an influencer, or that he was attracting a lot of attention?
I think we're both just blown away with how many people are impacted by him today. I love the fact that people say he's the youngest influencer, and of course we'll say it and just kind of get a chuckle out of it. I don't think that we're necessarily influencers. I think we're just people that just get a message out there and, want to share it with the world. I don't think there was any one moment, if you will, but I think at the end of the day, if we've impacted one additional person or one parent or maybe somebody that doesn't have a kid, and they reach out to us and say, we love your videos and we love following along. I think for us, that's what's most important. And I can tell you, we've had people from around the world that we may lose contact with them for months at a time. And all of a sudden, we'll just get a note out of the blue where they'll say, we saw your video and we saw this and we absolutely love it. It brought a smile to our face. And honestly, that's the kind of impact that we want to have on this world, is that we want to know that something that we've done has either impacted somebody in a positive way or caused them to do something different in their life that has left them with a positive impact.
Mm-hmm. And I wanted to share what it did for me, because I did watch it. For me, it was almost like bringing education into a different perspective and sharing and uplifting stories and messages, which I believe that actually you took a trip with your son recently, right?
Yes, we did. Almost 3, and we've been to 8 different countries so far. And our goal is, the world is a big place, and yet it's really quite so small. And by immersing him and really putting him into other cultures and to meet people, if they're family, friends, places we've never been to, I want him to experience that, because it's what's been important for me, and it's probably been one of the best learning experiences for both myself and for my wife. We think that that's how he's going to learn to be a better person, is to understand people and then to take that and to shape his own life and his own experiences.
So, this actually leads me to my question, which is, why do you think that cross-cultural awareness is important to bring into the workplace? Because obviously you guys have been traveling and giving yourself that experience.
It's really interesting you say that. I think the importance of bringing cross-cultural experiences into the workplace is this. We all come from different walks of life. So you may have a senior level person that comes from, for the purpose of this conversation, maybe Far East Asia, or maybe they come from the Northern Hemisphere, or maybe they come from Europe. And you might say the exact same phrase or position one topic to all of those people and get a different answer. And a lot of that has to do with the upbringing of those people. So the cultures, maybe the backgrounds, so the familial, so the parenting, how they were brought up, the way that they approach business as a whole. And the beauty of that is you can take every single one of those answers and apply them in a variety of ways. So for example, you might do something here in the United States that if you tried to do it in Europe, you would absolutely fail in terms of communication with people. You may try to do something in Asia or an Asian country that might resonate beautifully. And so the importance of bringing those types of things, or at least bringing the awareness of that, is simply just understanding that you have a perspective and other people around the world have other perspectives. It doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it wrong. It doesn't make it different. It doesn't make it the same. It's simply just identifying and observing that there's a different perspective. The people that operate best, I think, are the ones that can respect those and then operate within either the comforts or being respectful of those either boundaries or ways of doing business, and then having that cognizance of saying, well, this is what I can communicate and make my job more effective, or how we can accomplish more because I simply understand where somebody else is coming from or where they've come from.
So do you believe that diverse teams are more successful and the organizations that have diverse teams are more successful than the ones that don't?
I think they can be. I don't think diversity necessarily breeds a successful team. However, I think if you introduce diversity, depending on how that is defined, of course, I think that that can breed better range of thought. So I think that you can open yourself up to more opportunities and more options to come to different solutions.
So, this show will air on MLK Day, and I was wondering, what are your thoughts on today's leadership and the vision that Martin Luther King Jr. had for the leadership?
Yeah, such a powerful person, first of all, who implemented and really fostered great change, especially for the United States, but of course for the world as well. And I think the biggest thing that if we take anything away from it was to have the courage to step out and to say what you believe in and to fight for what you believe in. And I think to do it in the absolute right way to facilitate and implement change. And so I think in honor of MLK, he fought for hope. He fought for diversity of thought. And I think that you look at what Martin Luther King Jr. fought for during his time, and you look at what the generations are fighting for today during their time. And I think there's a lot of similarities. You might not have a polarizing figure that's front and center necessarily for change, or just to say, look, we have a voice and we want to be heard. But I think in honor of what he was doing, it was all about hope. It was all about there's a right, there's a wrong, and we just want to be heard. So I think in the spirit of everything that he did, and of course other great leaders that fought for change, I think the important thing is just to say that people are more willing to say that we have a voice and we want to be heard.
And to speak up.
And to speak up. Absolutely. You want to enable people and you want to create that safe space to say it's okay for you to voice what it is that you want to voice. So to create that forum or that platform for them to say, here's what I'm thinking and here's what I want people to hear me say.
And how do you encourage those that are afraid to speak up?
It's different for every single person. I think that most important thing is, just like we said at the very beginning, is you have to kind of understand yourself. I think that there are a lot of people today, especially once again with technology, it's very easy for people to just put something out there and then it's out there. And it's out there for millions of people to see. So I encourage people to share what it is that you want to share, but really be confident, be aware of what it is that you're saying, and maybe put some thought, be a little deliberate in what it is that you want to share. Because once you put it out there, it's out there for your friends, your families, future employers, anybody to see. So it's very easy to put something out there and then anybody can hear you. Mm-hmm. And it's very difficult to then make that voice go away. So once it's out there, and look, once again, it goes back to technology and social media and all the great and sometimes disturbing things that are out there. It's just be a little bit thoughtful in what it is that you're going to say. And I've actually had a couple of friends that have said this. It's amazing. In the last few months, they've kind of given this advice both on social media and also in person to just a variety of people. They said, when you put something out there, ask yourself this question. If you said this, is it something that you would say to your grandmother? grandmother? And if it was, what would your grandmother say back to you?
For me, it's all about congruency. And I think that's a very good point. Ask your grandma what she'd say about your statements.
Yeah, because it's easy to say something, and the biggest challenge is that you and I could speak, and we could say something, and you're speaking to a friend, maybe in a coffee shop, or maybe behind closed doors, and it's a very personal conversation. But I think that people forget that anonymity has kind of gone away. You say something out there, and now it's out there for the world to know. So just everything that you say, you're kind of building your own reputation or your brand, or you're breaking it. So just be aware, be mindful of what it is that you put out there, because everybody knows about it now.
And talking about putting out there and getting reactions from others, what are your thoughts of people being overly reactive to comments or negative feedback?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think it goes back to anonymity. The term that pops into my mind when you say that is, like cyberbullying. It's a real world, real life challenge, right? I'll start with kids and then adults, right? So as children, kids can be absolutely amazing and supportive, and they can also be absolutely just challenging and very hurtful and very mean, and things that can be said can really impact people, kids especially, as they're growing up. And so you look at like cyberbullying, and it's, once again, adding technology to it, where things are purposely said to make people feel bad. And it's not right, it's not wrong, it is the way of the world. And as you progress over life and into adulthood, and the same thing can be said, where people can have a variety of ways of bullying. And I just think that at the end of the day, same kind of advice is, before you say something to someone, it's almost, what do you gain by saying that to somebody? Are you leaving a positive impact? Are you trying to accomplish something by saying something like that? And so as a parent, especially now as I watch interact with other 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, and even older kids, I want my son to have manners. Something as simple as that. I want him to be polite. Perfect example. When we go to his school, as we open the door, we're holding the door for people to go in before us. So, if there's a lady, it's of course ladies first. And if it's a guy, it's showing them also the same respect to say, after you. So it's something that's so simple that I think for me in a society, I want my son to be well-mannered. I want him to say please. I want him to say thank you. And I think that for me, I can't hold other people to that standard, but I want to make sure that my own son understands that those little things are important, and that I hope that'll make him a better person as he grows up and help to shape him to be a leader or a spouse or a parent or whatever it is further on down the line. I want him to lead better than I lead.
And that actually leads me to my next question, which is, are there any traits that a leader needs to have to be a truly successful leader?
I think absolutely there are traits to be a successful leader. I think number one, honesty. So right, wrong, anything in between. I think that if you can build honesty and trust both for yourself and hold yourself accountable to what it is you're doing, for me, that's probably one of the number one things. And I think number two, leading on to that, is in the military, it was always about lead, not follow. So it was be willing to do something before you ask somebody else to do it. So for myself, it was always, if I was going to ask someone on my team or leaders on my team to do something, I wanted to make sure I was willing to do the same thing. And I was actually doing it first before asking them to do that. So it was always about lead and then follow. And then I think, one of the other things is that you have to have just an amazing amount of patience to understand that people deserve second and third and fourth and fifth and a variety of chances. So be willing to be patient, because everybody learns at different speeds. So what I might process or what I might learn in maybe 1 or 2 times might take somebody 10 times. But they may learn it in just 1 time, and then I have to keep up with them. So the patience piece kind of leads into, don't be afraid to learn from other people, regardless of who they are and where they are. I think the successful leaders always did that. They were willing to be open-minded to learn from anybody and everybody. It wasn't about a title. It wasn't about how long you'd done something. It was being willing to learn and to self-develop and always learn more than the next person.
And for me, learning and curiosity goes hand in hand.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, curiosity is amazing, because as an adult, you've kind of discounted them. You've kind of gotten past them and you've said, well, that's every day. I mean, that's just how it happens. And I think that we forget the simpler thing of, we'll kind of step back to your childhood and remember what that felt like, that curiosity or that adventure of something so simple and what it made you feel like. And I think if you can kind of gain that passion again, then it helps you to go after other things that are in life then.
I have a niece and she loves to have fun. So do you think that leaders should have fun or could have fun and still being taken seriously?
Absolutely. I think for me, the leaders that I've respected the most in the military, corporate America, the startup scene, whatever level it might be, are absolutely the ones that are there standing side by side, shoulder to shoulder with their people, showing that vulnerability, showing that softer side. Some people might term it as weakness. For me, it's showing that openness to share a little bit about themselves and be human, right? To say, here's who I am and here's what we share as people. There's no real difference. It's just being able to relate at a very steady level.
Any thoughts on generosity and leadership?
I think the word mentorship probably comes to mind for me. So the leaders I loved most and still love the most were the ones that were willing to hear what you had to say and then to provide unbiased feedback. So it was very objective to say, here's kind of what I observe, here's what I think you can do, and here are some solutions. So I appreciated those the most.
So it's almost like generosity with guidance.
Absolutely. Focused guidance.
Guidance. So what you're saying to us, don't just teach people how to fish, in other words.
I'm glad you brought that up. So somebody taught me this once. They said, instead of teaching people how to fish, why don't you teach them what equipment they need so they can learn to fish for themselves?
Well, that's a new one. I didn't hear that.
Right? So.
Yeah, because you do need to know your tools.
Absolutely.
So you managed a lot of teams, and my curiosity is, do you think that every manager is also a good leader, or that every leader can be a good manager?
I absolutely do not think that every manager can be a good leader, and I don't think every leader is a good manager. I think that sometimes there are people that are not meant to be leaders, and that's okay. And I think that sometimes managers may not turn out to be the best leaders, and that's not necessarily their fault. I think that there are managers that might envision themselves being good leaders, and they're just not given the right guidance or the right tools or the right help to progress to the next level. And there's people that don't want to be managers or leaders. There's always going to be people that just want to be followers and want to be told what to do, and they just want to be happy in their own bliss of doing what it is that somebody tells them to do. And that's perfectly fine too.
So for the ones that want to become leaders, do you think they can be trained?
I think that there are definitely people that can be trained to be leaders. Mm-hmm. I think that, some of the most important things are you have to have somebody that's willing to help guide them along the way. And then I think that person that is looking to be a leader, and if they've identified where maybe their shortfalls might be or their weaknesses, the term coachable comes up. So they have to be willing to develop themselves, but also to ask for help. I think that when somebody approaches and asks for help and says that this is what I'm trying to accomplish, I think that that's such a powerful statement to say that I've identified something within myself that's a weakness and I want to overcome it. That's the place where people should be willing to jump in to help out, especially if they see the opportunity for this person to become a great leader.
So it's always going back, I think, what you previously talked about. You have to know yourself well to ask or to give an advice, right?
So the challenge is this. I think that people aren't willing to put in the time for themselves before asking for help. And so I think that when someone asks for help, and I'll give you an example for myself. So if somebody approached me to say that, and this has happened a few times, probably in the last 10 years, where someone says, well, I want to know how you do what you do. And when I ask just a simple basic question of, well, what do you know about it? It's, well, I don't know anything about it. So I think the challenge is that if you're looking for a quick fix and a quick answer, that's not a successful leader. An answer where I can count a handful of times where somebody has said, well, I've done this and I've researched this and this is what I've seen. Like in my mind, a light bulb goes off. And it's like, okay, this person has attempted to do something. They've put in some of the research and the due diligence. They've identified their own shortcomings, and they've already looked at people that they would love to be like, or people who they're aspiring to be. That's somebody that's willing to develop themselves, not somebody that just says, I'm interested, tell me how you do it, and I don't want to do any work. That isn't going to make a good leader.
And in music, we actually say practice, patience, and perseverance. Mm-hmm. So it takes time. It's not overnight success.
100%. I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges that I see today is that people are just in a rush to be successful, or they're in a rush to see results. And unfortunately, that's just not the way that it typically works.
Talking about being in a rush, how do you know how much time you should give yourself, before you kind of give up and say, okay, maybe I'm not really good for that particular thing?
That's an awesome question. I would throw the question right back to you and say, if you were really passionate about something, how long would it take you to try and accomplish something?
Yeah, that's also a very good question. Yeah.
Right. So I think it's different for every person. And I think that it's different based on how important that thing is to you. And, some people might say, well, I'm going to put a timeline. If I don't accomplish this in a year, then I'm just going to quit and I'm going to give up. Is that necessarily right? Not really, but maybe for that person it is. Or maybe they just haven't taken a really good hard look at what they want to do for themselves. And every circumstance is going to be different, right? Life happens. Things happen that are sometimes out of our control. It's different for every single person.
I agree. So any thoughts for women leaders?
Great question. So I'll tell you what I tell my Marines. So the particular specialty I was in, we didn't have a lot of females that would qualify to be in that specialty. And this is what I told the men and the women, is that you're all Marines. So if in a situation, if somebody were to have to save your life, would it matter if they were a male or female? And it wouldn't. And I'll kind of give you the business aspect answer for women leaders today. And this is coming from, I have a wife who is in the healthcare industry. She's a very highly specialized physician who has worked her way, and she's done it because she's a highly intelligent person that, like you said, 3 Ps, right? And so what I would tell women leaders is that you're in a very unique time in our society where you're being afforded and given chances that maybe many years ago you never would have been given. And I would absolutely tell you to fight for every single opportunity. And if you feel that you're not being given a fair chance, step back and think about what is it that you're fighting for and continue to go after it. Don't go after it just because you're a female business leader. Go after what you want to dream and what you want to aspire to because you're a business leader. Don't let being a woman change it, positive or negative, for what you're trying to accomplish. And I tell that to the women leaders because, unfortunately, you're going to have plenty of people out there, men and women, that are not going to think that way. They're going to look at you and say, well, you're a woman and you can accomplish this. And I would firmly say, no, stand on what it is that you're good at. Fight for what you believe in, but don't fall into the game or the trap of what other people are trying to play with you. Be confident in yourself. And more importantly, this is the part that I hope resonates the most with the women leader out there, is that look to the men that are out there. I'm not saying men leaders. Look to the men that want to help you to accomplish what you want to accomplish. Not to just say, well, I'm a man and I should be your mentor. No, that's not absolutely what I'm not saying. I'm saying that there are men out there that want to help level the playing field because based on your experience, based on your talents, based on what you can accomplish, regardless of your gender, there are those of us out there that want people to succeed regardless of where you come from and who you are. So don't sit around the round table and say only women can help you to get to the next level. There are plenty of other people out there that want to help to level the playing field.
And it's interesting. I think we're circling back to what you said, being open and knowing that people are willing to help you, whether or not they're men or women.
I think so. I'll play devil's advocate for a minute. I absolutely love the fact that you have so many women leaders and women that are, especially today, in C-level positions with huge companies out there today. And they're creating and fostering this, let's get out there and continue to fight for equality that, should have been created years ago or is still being created across the industries. But I think that the devil advocate in me is that sometimes creating those groups, you're forgetting that, and I'll speak as a male at this point, right? So as a male, I don't know what those inadequacies are. I don't know what those shortcomings are unless I'm being given a seat at that table as well. So how can I go out there and help to foster the understanding when there's only women at the table? So don't continue to create those gaps that have already been created unjustly. So start to be more inclusive, start to incorporate it. And I don't know how many people are out there like that, but don't continue down that path. Let's include more people from both sides of the table, male and female, to help to bring parity to those things.
That's a very interesting point. What you're saying, be inclusive. Don't exclude people and then expect that they would know what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
That's great. So I want to kind of segue a little bit into reinvention because you reinvented yourself successfully many, many times. And I just want to get your thoughts. Why do you think reinvention is so important?
I think reinvention is important because regardless of what and where you come from, you get one chance. So my background is, and my wife is, we're Hindus, so, there's the reincarnation. And the reason why I turned to religion for just a second is to say it doesn't really matter, in my mind, what you believe at the end of the day based on how you live your life now. So when you talk about reinvention is you truly get one chance. So Sonny Tannan gets one shot. So if I haven't found what it is that I want to do now, or if I found that there's something else that I truly want to do, why shouldn't I be able to chase after that dream? Now, that includes a lot of things. That includes, your family, your friends, responsibilities, accountabilities, if it's financial, personal, whatever it may be. So I'm not saying just identify something and then just go after it. Be thoughtful in the process, identify it. But I think that we find that more people stay with what's comfortable or stay with what they've always known. And they're not too sure how to have the courage to take that leap of faith. And so for me, reinvention has absolutely been about family support, constant conversation and communication. And I'll be the first to say that I have not been an open book. I'm not always the best at communication. So continuing to self-improve on things that I know are either weaknesses or things that I absolutely want to get better at. And reinvention is about being able to say, well, what's important to me now? Don't be afraid to reprioritize as life changes. So before I was a husband, before I was a dad, I had very different priorities. But as life changed, I started to reprioritize. And that's okay. It's okay to do that because I think that if you start to do that, then you continue to go down the path of doing things that make you happy.
So what you're saying to us, it's okay not to stay the same.
Absolutely. I absolutely say that if you haven't identified your core self and what's important to you, number one, do that. And then number two, I think it's okay. And in fact, it's acceptable to continue to change the way that you do things as your own life changes. And then, of course, the third thing is always just be aware of what you do impacts not only yourself, but other people.
And this really leads me to my next question, which is how do you stay humble while engaging or leading others?
That's a really interesting question because I think that if you aren't humble throughout the way that you lead, then it's very hard to become humble as you continue to lead. So I think different leaders and successful in different ways will lead by different styles. So I don't necessarily think that every leader is going to be humble. But same thing, to your point, I think that the really good leaders are the ones that don't go and shout, I'm the greatest, I'm the best in this. It's actually the people that enable and foster their people to greatness. And I'll give you an example. So sports analogy, because we haven't done one of those yet. I was just reading an article about Andy Reid, who is a professional NFL coach for the Kansas City Chiefs. And I believe he has coached numerous coordinators, assistants, and whatnot who have now gone on to coach their own football teams. So I think a great coach is somebody that teach and train and share. And of course, the first thing they're going to say is, well, those people made me great at what I do. Those are the great coaches, right? So how do you stay humble? You just stay true to the essence of yourself and you do what it is that you were brought on to do. And it's like leading people and developing people, and you enable and foster and grow other leaders. So how do you stay humble? You train other people to be leaders, just like you, if not better.
And what is your mission in life?
My mission is to make sure that I leave this place a better place than I found it, and to make sure that my son does the same thing, if not better.
Any final thoughts?
No, I'm extremely appreciative that I had the opportunity to talk with you and that others will hear this, and that if I can ever help other people or to become a part of something else that helps others along the way, at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, is to continue to make a positive change.
And how can people learn about the book? I know the book has a website, but I thought maybe you can share that with us and other things that you do.
Yeah, great question. I appreciate it. So it's interesting. So the book doesn't actually launch until March 5th of this year. And so we actually had to create a website because we were able to convince our publisher to give us, we're fans of 3. So we had 300 early release books for the holiday seasons because people wanted to get the books in their hand before the official release date. So we created a website where people are going to get a chance to not only order the book, but to follow along, learn a little bit about It's all about making sure that people understand the why. Like, why are we putting this book series out there? And so, eyesofhome.com, that's the website. And we're now on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Of course, LinkedIn is our first love of social media because that's where we really started. Mm-hmm. And all I would ever say is that if you ever have questions or want to learn more, just reach out, connect with me. And, Om and I are always happy to get future conversations with other people. I mean, we're more than happy to not only talk with the parents, but we've had parents with kids reach out to us to say, our kids actually love seeing what Om is doing. And like, to me, that's like the single best compliment I could ever get, is that there's other kids that are inspired by what Om does. He's a totally normal kid at the end of the day.
And what would be the best way for people to contact you?
So our email address is eyesofom3@gmail.com. You can find us at eyesofom.com. And then we're completely open for the right opportunities to chat with people if it helps you guys out and gals.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sonny, for being a guest.
Appreciate it. And feel free to reach out at any point.
Wonderful. Thank you. Our special guest was Sonny Tannan, a veteran, award-winning business developer, philanthropist, and the author of the book Through the Eyes of Om. And now Sonny will be reading an excerpt from the book. Enjoy.
What does a 91-year-old great-grandmother look like? Would she like me? Would I like her? What do you think happened when I saw her for the first time? When I saw her, she smiled, and I wasn't scared anymore. In fact, I ran up to her and I gave her a hug. And she gave me lots of kisses and some special gifts. In fact, as a fan of 3, let me share 3 things that I learned about how to show respect to my elders. Number 1, touching the feet of my elders represents humility. In turn, the elder blesses me with long life and wisdom. Number 2, saying namaste to an elder is a way to ask for blessings and knowledge from that elder. And number 3, accepting an angpo, or a special red envelope that typically contains money, is a symbol that you have gratefully accepted a token of good fortune. I count myself so lucky to have met my great-grandmother, because family, near or far, is everything.
Thank you for tuning in and listening to the Leadership with Biana Kovic Show. Remember that you're all leaders in your own rights, and the impact that you're meant to achieve starts with small acts of kindness, curiosity, and generosity. Please give us a like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you again, and until next time.